William Shakespeare was an English playwright, poet, and actor. He is widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language and the world's preeminent dramatist. He is often called England's national poet and the Bard of Avon. His extant works, including collaborations, consist of some 39 plays, 154 sonnets, 3 long narrative poems, and a few other verses, some of uncertain authorship. His plays have been translated into every major living language and are performed more often than those of any other playwright. 7. Shakespeare remains arguably the most influential writer in the English language, and his works continue to be studied and reinterpreted. Shakespeare was born in Stratford-upon-Avon to John Shakespeare and Mary Arden, a successful glover. He was the third of 8 children and the eldest surviving son. Shakespeare was educated at the King's New School in Stratford, a free school chartered in 1553. At 18, he married Anne Hathaway, and they had a daughter, Susanna, and twins, Hamnet and Judith. Shakespeare's lost years between 1585 and 1592 are referred to as lost years. Apocryphal stories have been reported, such as a Stratford legend that Shakespeare fled the town for London to escape prosecution for deer poaching and wrote a scurrilous ballad about him. Some 20th-century scholars suggest that Shakespeare may have been employed as a schoolmaster by Alexander Houghton of Lancashire, a Catholic landowner who named a certain William Shakeshaft in his will. Little evidence substantiates these stories other than hearsay collected after his death. Shakespeare's plays were on the London stage by 1592, and by then, he was well known in London. In his groat's worth of wit, playwright Robert Greene attacked Shakespeare in print, accusing him of trying to match university-educated writers like Christopher Marlowe, Thomas Nash, and Greene himself. This attack is the earliest surviving mention of Shakespeare's work in the theatre. After 1594, Shakespeare's plays were performed at the theatre in Shoreditch by the Lord Chamberlain's Men, which became the leading playing company in London. After Queen Elizabeth's death in 1603, the company was awarded a royal patent and changed its name to the King's Men. Shakespeare built the Globe Theatre in 1599 and invested in Stratford's parish tithes. His plays became a selling point by 1598, and he continued to act in plays. He lived in St. Helens before moving to Southwark in 1599. Shakespeare died at 52 on April 23, 1616, shortly after signing his will. His wife and 2 daughters survived him. His last will and testament bequeathed the bulk of his estate to his elder daughter Susanna, who passed it down intact to the first son of her body. Shakespeare was a prolific writer known for his comedies, histories, and tragedies. His works, including the 36 plays in the First Folio of 1623, are classified as comedies, histories, and tragedies. 2 plays not included in the First Folio are now considered part of the canon, with scholars agreeing that Shakespeare made major contributions to both. In the late 19th century, Edward Dowden classified 4 of the late comedies as romances, while Frederick S. Boas coined the term problem plays to describe 4 plays: All's Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, Troilus and Cressida, and Hamlet. Shakespeare also published 2 narrative poems on sexual themes, Venus and Adonis, and The Rape of Lucrece, in 1593 and 1594. His first plays were written in the conventional style of the day, with stylized language and extended metaphors. Some critics argue that the grand speeches in Titus Andronicus and the verse in The 2 Gentlemen of Verona are stilted. Shakespeare's career began with a blend of traditional and freer styles, with Romeo and Juliet being a prime example. He combined the 2 styles throughout his career, with his standard poetic form being blank verse, composed in iambic pentameter. This verse was often unrhymed and had a risk of monotony. Once mastered, Shakespeare began to interrupt and vary its flow, releasing the new power and flexibility of the poetry in plays like Julius Caesar and Hamlet. After Hamlet, Shakespeare varied his poetic style further, particularly in the emotional passages of late tragedies. In the last phase of his career, he adopted techniques such as run-on lines, irregular pauses, and extreme variations in sentence structure and length. The late romances inspired a last poetic style, where long and short sentences were set against one another, clauses were piled up, subject and object were reversed, and words were omitted, creating an effect of spontaneity. Shakespeare, a playwright, combined poetic genius with a practical sense of theater, dramatizing stories from sources like Plutarch and Holinshed. He reshaped plots to create multiple centers of interest and show multiple sides of a narrative to the audience. Shakespeare's work has made a significant impact on later theater and literature, expanding the dramatic potential of characterization, plot, language, and genre. Romance was not considered a worthy topic for tragedy until Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare's work heavily influenced later poetry, with Romantic poets attempting to revive Shakespearean verse drama. His work has inspired novelists, operas, painters, and filmmakers, with Akira Kurosawa adapting Macbeth and King Lear as Throne of Blood and Ran, and Max Reinhardt's A Midsummer Night's Dream, Laurence Olivier's Hamlet, and Al Pacino's documentary Looking for Richard. Orson Welles, a lifelong lover of Shakespeare, directed and starred in Macbeth, Othello, and Chimes at Midnight. Shakespeare's language use has a big impact on current English, influencing pronunciation, syntax, and spelling. The phrases with bated breath and a foregone conclusion, among others, have been assimilated into common English discourse. His writings have been widely translated and made popular in Germany, demonstrating his influence outside of England and the English language. Shakespeare emancipated writers around the continent with his all-encompassing appeal and his ability to appreciate language and character in motion. He continues to be the best-selling playwright in the world, having sold over 4 billion copies of his plays and poetry. Shakespeare received significant praise during his lifetime, including being ranked among the most excellent in comedy and tragedy by Francis Mears in 1598. He was also compared to Chaucer, Gower, and Spenser in the Parnassus plays at St. John's College, Cambridge. However, between the restoration of the monarchy in 1660 and the end of the 17th century, classical ideas were in vogue, leading to criticisms ranging from low to high. Despite this, critics began to acclaim Shakespeare's natural genius, with scholarly editions and his reputation spreading internationally. During the Romantic era, Shakespeare was praised by poet and literary philosopher Samuel Taylor Coleridge and critic August Wilhelm Schlegel. The modernist revolution in the arts during the early 20th century enlisted Shakespeare's work in the service of the avant-garde, with expressionists in Germany and futurists in Moscow staging productions of his plays. T.S. Eliot and the School of New Criticism led a movement towards a closer reading of Shakespeare's imagery.